Hey all, my name is Oda, and this is a Courtree TV Talk. Today we're talking to Franklyn McFadden about employment, disability in the workforce. Thanks for talking to me today, Frank.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So I want to talk today a little bit about you, start off a little bit about you. Can you give us a little bit about your background, tell us about your work experience, and what do you do in your current role?
Okay. Well, I as Oda mentioned, I am Frank McFadden. I have cerebral palsy, which affects my left side mostly, and my lower legs as well. And because of that, I largely depend on a motorized wheelchair to facilitate the majority of my mobility. A little bit about my background. After a somewhat tedious and albeit daunting employment search, largely in the need to fulfill my own requirement, my own need to do more with my life once graduating from school, I decided it was important that I become a member of the working world. And after establishing that mission, I started taking critical steps to ensure that that would happen. One of those steps was seeking out employment agencies to help me facilitate this goal.
And such agency is SciOntario Employment. How has your experience with them been?
I've had a wonderful experience with them thus far. I've worked with them for a number of years now, and I have nothing but glowing reviews to share. I find that they have been nothing short of supportive, and that support in turn has really allowed me to really shine and demonstrate my strengths within the workplace.
So can you tell me a little bit about your current role? What do you do currently?
Currently, I am I do customer service at a local supermarket, and so I've been welcomed famously in this supermarket, and I can only say that it's been a hugely rewarding experience that I'm so fortunate to have had.
How long have you been doing your current job?
I started there in October of last year.
If you could think back to your previous job and the time in between where you were looking for work, what made your transition to the customer service job you currently have? What made the transition easier?
Well, I don't mind sharing that my overall search for employment hasn't really gone as easily. I mean, who can say that a job search ever goes easily? But I think for myself, it's been particularly difficult because, you know, not only am I trying to navigate putting my best foot forward and demonstrating to potential employers that I can support them in their workplace in trying to help them facilitate their objectives. But the added layer comes in with the fact that I am not like the average pedestrian, and I do rely on mobility supports to get around, which creates a whole host of other questions and sometimes problems if you aren't able to sidestep them effectively.
Do you mind sharing like what kind of problems? Does it have to do with accommodations and things like that?
I would hesitate to say that needing accommodations create problems, but there, I mean, I think it would be foolhardy of me to say that I haven't faced potential employers that have been largely reluctant to explore that accommodation conversation, because, you know, initially in the interview process, as I said, you know, for a person with a disability, there's always two hats that you have to wear, because the first hat says, yes, I am, seeking employment from you, uh, employer X, and I also want you to know that in spite of the fact that I've arrived in a wheelchair, my wheelchair isn't going to be an impediment to the skills that I have to offer. And then we spend the rest of the interview process trying to shift the conversation away from the fact that I came in a wheelchair, but yet I still have a lot more to offer. And I simply want you to shift away from the fact that, yes, I am in a wheelchair. So, trying to navigate that minefield is always a little bit of a challenge, but it's important to, as I said, shift the conversation away from mobility and more, and change it or shift the conversation towards what you're going to bring to the employer, and why your employment there will be a benefit to all around.
That's really good advice. As a person with a disability myself, I can attest to the problems that could go along with wanting to be seen as an employee and contributing active member of society like everybody else. Unfortunately, we have to make a case for ourselves sometimes, but
Certainly.
But once we do, and we have our accommodations and we're comfortable, we can be part of the workforce.
Certainly.
So what would you say to someone who wants to be part of the workforce? What would you say to that person looking for a job right now?
Well, I can only tell you about my own journey. And so if I was to say anything to an individual who was seeking employment, no matter who they are, whether they have a disability or not, the first thing I would say is that it's important to know yourself. Intimately know yourself first. The second thing is know what you're willing to say to someone should they ask a critical question. And when I say know yourself, for me, I like to characterize myself as being an open book. And I say this because even when I'm in the workplace right now, I still get the odd question where, someone says, something to the effect of, why do you use this wheelchair? Why is this particular button in this position, or whatever the case is? And I mean, I've had employers ask me questions like that, and I've had, people, members of the public as well, ask me questions like that. And so knowing yourself means, it's often a question of asking the question of yourself one day in the mirror. How would I answer this question? If someone else asked me, why do I move in a certain way? Am I going to talk? How deep am I going to go? Is it going to be something as simple as, I you have to know what that answer is going to be, and you gotta figure out how deep you're gonna go. But the other thing is that you have to know who your audience is and be able to meet them where they are, because I'm not someone that will shy away from questions, because I feel like people asking questions are really invaluable tools for everybody to learn something. And even while I'm in the workplace, I constantly find that my presence there is a valuable teaching tool.
That's an amazing answer, Frank. I really appreciate that. That's good employment advice. It's good life advice. Know yourself. Have self-reflection. Be confident. That's really good. Appreciate that. Changing gears a little bit, I want to ask you about the current times, the new normal. COVID has changed everything in the last 2 years, including making everyone more comfortable with working at home. I wanted to ask you, what impact has COVID had on you?
Well, I'm not gonna lie, COVID has really thrown everybody for a loop, especially myself. Um, I mean, I've been in a wheelchair my entire life, and so regardless of the situation that I'm in, I'm constantly having to navigate this minefield inside or outside of COVID. experiencing this COVID situation, it has added a completely different layer of expectations and different questions and different concerns that I myself will have to navigate and find solutions to. So unfortunately, I have been someone that has been fortunate enough to maintain a job and continue working while experiencing this COVID situation, and I am profoundly grateful for that. But when we ask about what COVID has how COVID has impacted me, short of you know public messaging protocols and ensuring that you wash your hands and wear your mask and things like that. Fortunately, outside of those kinds of situations, I don't really feel as though there has been a significant impact toward me, because short of everybody, you know, doing the 2 meter distance thing, and you're, you know, trying to make yourself heard when you're saying something to somebody and trying to navigate, how do I communicate with this person enough to, number one, be taken seriously, and number two, get my message across. I think that would be the most significant barrier that I've experienced.
Unemployment is still low for people with disabilities in Canada. So what advice would you give recruiters who are trying to expand employee diversity in their workplace?
Certainly. Well, I mean, diversity is a huge topic, and I don't pretend to be an expert on it. But what I will say is that for me, I think that having those diverse conversations really means asking the tough questions. But I would say a large part of that is on people that are seeking employment. And I feel like questions like that also go back to knowing how you want to present yourself to employers, and so on and so forth. But when we talk about diversity, I think, you know, diverse workplaces, regardless of what the task is, they're always important, because diversity in and of itself creates a whole list of challenges that people are always trying to navigate. And so when I talk to potential employers, I would just say, you know, remember that your potential employee and yourself now have a wonderful opportunity to learn something about each other. If there's an opportunity to, you know, shift the whatever the conversation is away from the workplace or whatever, where, you know, we can sit down and have a meal together, that might be a way of lessening the challenges that come with navigating diversity in the workplace. But I mean, I would encourage every employer to take a chance, because, you know, your employee and yourself as the employer are always trying to learn something. And if we can't come to a place where we're willing to learn from each other, then we won't be able to break down the barriers that we are trying to navigate together.
Okay, that's all, folks. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to check out our website, courtree.com, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Courtree TV. And thank you, Frank, for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.